Andre Williams sat in his downtown Atlanta office, staring at the email on his screen. The message was brief, but its weight pressed down on him like an anchor. It was about his luxury retail empire, Veralux, a brand he had built from the ground up. His stores, a symbol of wealth, exclusivity, and high-end service, were renowned across the country. But lately, disturbing whispers had reached his ears. Whispers about one store in particular, his flagship location in Miami, Florida. The complaints were subtle, cloaked in indirect language, but Andre knew exactly what they meant. Customers who didn't fit the look, were being turned away. There was no mention of race, no explicit accusations, but Andre had lived with those subtle judgments his whole life. Growing up on the tough streets of Memphis, Tennessee, he had been no stranger to assumptions made based on his appearance. Assumptions that followed him into his career as a CEO. Now in charge of a luxury brand, he thought those days were behind him. But it seemed the biases that haunted his past had somehow crept into the very heart of his empire. Disappointment simmered in Andre's chest. He had fought so hard to break down these barriers. He had fought to create a company that saw people for who they truly were, not for how they looked. But now, these same barriers seemed to have taken root in the very place he'd built to tear them down. He couldn't let it slide. Not in his stores. Not in his brand. He leaned back in his chair, fingers pressed to his lips, deep in thought. The rumors, the complaints, they weren't just numbers on a screen, they were real. They were painful reminders of a world that refused to see beyond the surface. He couldn't just sit back and let it fester. He had to see for himself. Without hesitation, he picked up his phone. "Maya," he said, his voice calm but determined. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow. I'm flying to Miami." The next morning, Andre stood in front of the Veralux store on Ocean Drive, Miami Beach. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the hum of traffic mingled with the distant sound of crashing waves. His reflection stared back at him from the glass storefront. But today, there was something different. Gone were his usual tailored suit and polished Rolex. Instead, he wore worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. Today, he wasn't the CEO of Veralux. He was just a man on the street, trying to understand what it felt like to be ignored, to be judged by appearance. He stepped inside the store, the cool air rushing over him. The space was immaculate, marble floors gleaming beneath soft lighting, the faint scent of expensive cologne mixing with the metallic gleam of designer jewelry and handbags. It was a luxury oasis. But as Andre walked through the store, something felt off. There were a few other customers inside, a couple obviously well off, being fawned over by an enthusiastic sales associate. But as Andre drifted toward a case of leather bags, he noticed it. Not a single associate acknowledged him. No nod of recognition. Not even a glance from the security guard standing by the door. It was as if he was invisible. He picked up a bag. The leather was soft under his fingers, sleek, minimalist, timeless. He'd designed it himself. But as his eyes scanned the room again, he saw the man he had been waiting for. Greg Coleman, the manager, stood at the back of the store eyeing him. His gaze hardened when it landed on Andre. Here we go, Andre thought, bracing himself for what was coming. Greg's steps were slow and deliberate as he walked toward Andre. There was no greeting, no smile. Just a cold, narrow-eyed glance at the bag Andre held in his hand. "Can I help you with something?" Greg asked, his tone sharp and condescending. Andre glanced up from the bag. "Just looking," he replied calmly. Greg's lips twisted into a thin line. "Well, those bags are quite expensive," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable browsing over there," he added, motioning toward the corner where the lower-priced items sat. Andre's jaw tightened. There it was, the assumption, unmasked and unmistakable. Greg had already decided who Andre was. A man who didn't belong in the luxury section. "I think I'll stick with this," Andre replied, keeping his voice steady. Greg folded his arms across his chest, eyeing Andre's worn jeans and t-shirt. "Are you sure?" he pressed. "This isn't really the kind of store where people just browse." Andre placed the bag back carefully, his expression remaining neutral. He'd seen enough. "I'll let you know if I need help," he said, turning away from Greg and walking toward the door. As he exited, he could feel Greg's eyes boring into his back. The judgment lingered in the air, clinging to him like a familiar weight. The next day, Andre returned to the store, but this time, everything was different. Gone was the baseball cap and the t-shirt. Instead, Andre was dressed in a custom-tailored suit, his polished shoes clicking on the pavement as he approached the glass doors. Inside, the staff bustled with energy, preparing for another busy day. Greg, ever the leader, stood at the front directing the team. They had no idea what was coming. When Andre stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The associates, who had ignored him the day before, now jumped into action eager to please. Eyes widened, recognition set in. Even Greg's usual confidence faltered when he saw the man he had dismissed now standing tall, radiating authority. "Mr. Williams," Greg stammered, his voice filled with forced enthusiasm. "Welcome to the store. I wasn't expecting you today." Andre smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm here to see how things are running," he said casually, though his tone carried an edge. "I had an interesting visit yesterday." Greg's face paled, but he quickly regained composure. "I'm so sorry to hear that, sir," he said, trying to backpedal. "If there were any issues, I'll personally make sure they're resolved." Andre didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate look around the store. The staff stood at attention now, eager to please, their attitude a stark contrast to yesterday's indifference. It was all a performance, and it didn't escape Andre's notice that Greg hadn't truly grasped the gravity of what had happened. "I'll be honest with you, Greg," Andre began, his voice low and firm. "What I experienced yesterday wasn't just a minor issue. It was a pattern of disrespect based on assumptions." Greg's smile faltered, but he remained silent, waiting for Andre to continue. "You see," Andre continued, his eyes locking with Greg's, "you assumed that because I wasn't dressed like your usual clientele, I didn't belong here. You treated me differently based on what you saw on the surface." Greg opened his mouth to protest, but Andre raised a hand, silencing him. "I've been where you are," he said. "I know what it's like to face those assumptions every day. But I didn't build this company for people like you to bring those biases into my stores." The room fell silent. The other staff members stood frozen, eyes wide with shock. Andre's gaze hardened. "So here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice calm but resolute. "You're not going to be fired. Not yet. But you're going to personally greet every customer that walks through those doors, regardless of what they look like. And you're going to serve them with the respect they deserve." Greg swallowed hard, his face flushed with embarrassment. "If you can't do that," Andre said, his voice unwavering, "then you won't be working here anymore. And trust me, if you slip up, even once, I'll make sure you're never in a position to treat anyone like that again." What followed was a test for Greg, and for the entire store. Andre kept a close eye, ensuring that the changes stuck. Over time, the staff began to shift their attitudes, seeing how Greg's humiliation had affected the entire culture. The whispers of his disgrace spread through the company like wildfire, and slowly, the toxic atmosphere in the store unraveled. But Andre wasn't satisfied with just one store. He knew this problem ran deeper. And so, he launched a company-wide diversity and inclusion training program, making it clear that there would be no tolerance for discrimination in any form. Weeks passed, and Andre's resolve was unshaken. Change was coming, and it was just the beginning. The change in the store was becoming impossible to ignore. The once unwelcoming atmosphere had transformed. Customers who had previously felt out of place began to return, sensing a shift in the environment. Staff members who had once turned a blind eye to Greg's behavior now wore pride in their efforts to treat every customer with fairness and respect. Andre knew the battle wasn't over, but there was no denying the progress. He could feel it in the air. When he finally returned to the store weeks later, dressed casually as he had once been, the difference hit him immediately. The same associates who had once ignored him now greeted him with genuine smiles, offering assistance without hesitation, without judgment. Even Greg, humbled by the experience, had learned something vital. As Andre walked through the store, a sense of peace settled over him. Yes, the fight against prejudice was far from won, but he had made a stand in his own company. And that was only the beginning. Respect, he thought, feeling the weight of the word as he left the store. It wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. And now, Every corner of Vera Lux reflected that belief. Weeks had passed since Andre's confrontation with Greg, and the changes in the store were undeniable. The staff's behavior had shifted dramatically, treating every customer with the respect and professionalism that had been sorely lacking before. But Andre wasn't satisfied with a temporary fix. He knew that lasting change needed to be woven into the very fabric of the company, something everyone, no matter their position, had to believe in. And Greg Coleman, once smug and secure in his place in the store's hierarchy, was now a changed man. It wasn't just fear of losing his job that drove him anymore. There was a visible difference in him. Each morning, Greg greeted customers with a smile, his posture less rigid, his eyes open to the diversity of those walking through the doors. He had learned the hard way that assumptions were dangerous. But Andre wasn't content with changing one store. No, his vision stretched far beyond that, across the entire chain. After returning to his office in Atlanta, he immediately set up meetings with his executive team to discuss the rollout of diversity and inclusion programs across the company. Every location, from Los Angeles to Houston, Boston to Miami, needed to be aligned with his vision for Vera Lux. In the headquarters boardroom, voices of concern mingled with a hopeful undercurrent. Andre listened closely to each department head, making it clear that this was more than just a checkbox program. It was a movement, a chance to change the culture of the brand. There's more to this than numbers, Andre said, his gaze unwavering as he stood at the head of the table. We're not just selling products. We're representing something bigger. Every customer who walks into one of our stores deserves to feel respected. That's what this is about. His words resonated. The room fell silent, each executive knowing the weight of what Andre was asking. They understood that this was personal for him, and none of them dared stand in the way of his vision. Maya, his assistant, raised her hand, breaking the stillness. Andre, what you're proposing is significant. But how do we ensure every store takes it seriously? Not all locations are facing the same challenges. Andre nodded thoughtfully. The stores need to be held accountable. But more importantly, the managers need to be on board. They have to believe in this, not just do it because they're told. Frank, the head of operations, spoke up next. We could tie performance metrics to customer satisfaction scores, include feedback from all types of customers. That way, if a store's numbers drop due to discriminatory behavior, we can address it right away. Andre considered it for a moment. It's a start, but it needs to go deeper. I want feedback from the employees themselves, anonymous surveys, direct input from the staff, not just customers. Maya nodded again. And what about consequences for managers who don't comply? We need to make sure people understand this isn't just lip service. Andre's lips curved slightly. Greg Coleman's already learning that lesson, and I guarantee he won't forget it. But yes, consequences will be clear. If any manager can't uphold these values, they'll be replaced. No questions asked. The following week, Andre flew to Houston for the official rollout of the new program. He'd chosen this city for a reason. The Vera Lux store in Houston was one of the top performers in terms of sales, but it also had the highest number of complaints about discriminatory behavior. When Andre walked into the store, he saw the same polished marble floors, the same luxurious displays. But something was different. The atmosphere wasn't as cold as the one he'd experienced in Miami, but there was still an undeniable tension in the air. The staff were polite, yes, but there was a distance in their interactions, as if they were just going through the motions. He greeted Carl Jenkins, the store manager, a middle-aged man who had been with Vera Lux for nearly a decade. Carl was known for running a tight ship, his numbers always impeccable. But Andre had read the feedback, both from customers and employees, and knew there were deeper issues here. Carl greeted Andre with a firm handshake, his smile wide but strained. Mr. Williams, it's an honor to have you here. We've been looking forward to your visit. I appreciate that, Carl, Andre replied, his tone calm but firm. I'm here to talk about the new program we're rolling out. I'm sure you've heard about it. Carl's smile faltered for just a second. Yes, of course. I've briefed the team. We're ready to implement whatever you need. I'm glad to hear that, Andre said. But I want to make something clear, Carl. This isn't just about implementing a program. It's about changing the way we treat people, customers and staff alike. Carl's hands clasped tighter in front of him. Absolutely, Mr. Williams. I understand the importance of diversity and inclusion. We've always prided ourselves on being a welcoming place for everyone. Andre held Carl's gaze unwavering. That's what I want to see, Carl. Not just in words, but in action. I've read the reports from this store, and I've seen the complaints. People feel like they don't belong here. And that's not what Vera Lux stands for. Carl opened his mouth to respond, but Andre continued, cutting him off. This isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about making sure that every customer who walks through those doors feels valued. That's what I expect. And that's what I'm here to enforce. Carl nodded, though Andre could sense the hesitation lingering in his eyes. Of course, Mr. Williams. We'll make sure everything is in place. In the weeks that followed, Andre made it a point to visit several other stores across the country, Seattle, Dallas, and more, observing how customers were treated and ensuring the new program was fully implemented. With every store he visited, it became clearer to him. This wasn't just about training. It was about changing mindsets, breaking down years of ingrained prejudice that had gone unchallenged for far too long. Back in Atlanta, Andre sat in his office, staring at the latest reports from the Diversity and Inclusion Program. The feedback was encouraging. Customer satisfaction scores were up, and employees felt more empowered to speak up about bias. But Andre knew the fight was far from over. It would take time, effort, and persistence. One afternoon, Maya knocked on his door, a stack of papers in her hand. Andre, you're going to want to see this, she said, her tone serious. Andre gestured for her to come in. What is it? Maya handed him the papers. It's the latest report from the Miami store. The numbers are up, customer complaints are down by nearly 50%. But that's not all. Greg Coleman has been sending in regular updates on his progress. Andre raised an eyebrow. Greg's been sending updates? Maya nodded. He's changed. From what I've heard, he's been taking the new program seriously. He's even taken it upon himself to train new staff, making sure they understand the values we're trying to instill. Andre smiled faintly. I guess he's learned his lesson. Maya chuckled softly, her voice tinged with a sense of recognition. It seems so, she said, a spark of realization flickering in her eyes. And from what I can tell, the rest of the staff has followed his lead. As Andre walked through the familiar glass doors of the Miami store, the atmosphere felt transformed, as though something intangible had shifted. The change was undeniable, and it hit him the moment he stepped inside. Gone was the cold, distant vibe that once hung in the air. The staff greeted him warmly, offering genuine smiles and eager assistance, their gestures flowing with a new sense of authenticity. It was a far cry from the tense, robotic interactions he remembered. Greg, the manager, approached him with a humility that took Andre by surprise. His posture was no longer stiff with arrogance, but relaxed and respectful. Mr. Williams, Greg said, extending his hand, his eyes meeting Andre's with a sincerity that spoke volumes. It's good to see you again. Andre shook his hand, feeling the weight of the change in Greg's gaze. It's good to be back, he replied, his voice carrying a note of pride. I've heard things are going well here, Greg said, his tone full of quiet satisfaction. Andre nodded, his chest swelling with pride. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. He walked further into the store, watching the staff interact with customers from all walks of life. There was a sense of accomplishment in the air, a recognition that their journey, though long, was moving in the right direction. Sure, there was still work to be done, but the progress was undeniable. The message had been absorbed. Prejudice has no place here. Vera Lux wasn't just a brand. It was a symbol of inclusion, a beacon of change. Days turned to weeks, and Andre's vision continued to take root across all Vera Lux locations. Employees were embracing the new culture, one built on respect and inclusion. Yet, Andre knew better than to rest on his laurels. He was acutely aware that real transformation demanded vigilance, a steady hand to guide it. His job wasn't over, not by a long shot. In San Francisco, at one of their busiest locations on Market Street, Andre faced a new challenge. The store manager, Evelyn Harper, was efficient, no doubt. The store gleamed with an almost obsessive level of perfection, but beneath the polished exterior, things weren't as they seemed. Employees whispered of a culture rooted in fear, where the focus on numbers came at the expense of respect. It wasn't as overt as Greg's behavior in Miami, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface. On a foggy afternoon, Andre made his way to the San Francisco store, dressed casually for his surprise visit. He wanted to see things as they were, unfiltered. The store's immaculate displays reflected Evelyn's attention to detail, but as Andre moved deeper inside, he noticed a subtle but palpable tension in the air. The staff moved like clockwork, polite but stiff. They were walking on eggshells, afraid to make mistakes. At the jewelry counter, a young associate greeted him with a smile that quickly faded into nervousness. She hesitated before responding to his inquiry about the diamond collection, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't the usual confidence he expected from his team. Her eyes darted over her shoulder, nervously checking if Evelyn was watching. Andre followed her gaze and sure enough, Evelyn stood at a distance, watching with hawk-like intensity, evaluating every interaction with an almost clinical precision. Andre sensed the tension in the room and knew something had to be done. "Is there a problem?" he asked gently, his tone soft but probing. The young woman quickly shook her head, but her anxiety was palpable. No, it's fine," she said, glancing again at her boss. I just want to make sure I don't mess anything up." Andre felt the weight of the fear pressing down on her. This wasn't the environment he had envisioned for Vera Lux. He moved through the store, taking in the strained interactions around him. Associates were distant, more concerned about pleasing Evelyn than offering a welcoming atmosphere to customers. It was clear that the focus on performance had overshadowed the human side of the business. Determined to get to the heart of the issue, Andre decided to speak directly with Evelyn. He approached her, curious to see if he could have a candid conversation with her about the culture in the store. "Good afternoon," he said as he walked up. Evelyn smiled stiffly, her back straight as a rod, her demeanor still rigid. "Mr. Williams, it's an honor to have you here. We didn't know you'd be visiting today." Andre smiled lightly. "That's how I prefer it," he said with a chuckle. "I like to see how things run when no one's expecting me." Evelyn nodded, though her posture didn't soften. "Everything is running smoothly here, I assure you. We've been performing above targets for the past 6 months." "I've noticed," Andre replied neutrally. "But I'm also hearing from some of your staff that they're feeling a lot of pressure. I saw it myself just now." Evelyn's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "We're a high-performing store, Mr. Williams. There's always pressure to deliver." Andre met her gaze, his voice steady but firm. "I get that, Evelyn. But what's important to me is how that pressure affects the way we treat people, both our staff and our customers." Evelyn hesitated. She knew her store's numbers were strong, but Andre wasn't here to talk about profits. He wanted something deeper. "I want to make sure everyone in this store feels respected and valued," he continued. "From what I've seen, there's room for improvement. You have a talented team, but they seem more afraid of making mistakes than they are focused on providing a great experience for our customers." Evelyn's posture stiffened. "I run a tight ship, Mr. Williams. We don't tolerate errors here. It's how we've maintained our reputation." Andre sighed, choosing his words carefully. "I understand the need for efficiency, Evelyn. But there's a balance. It's not just about preventing mistakes. It's about making sure that the people working for you feel like they can contribute, without fear." Evelyn pressed her lips together, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll take your feedback into consideration," she said, her tone clipped. Andre nodded, understanding that change wouldn't come in a single conversation. He would have to follow up, to keep an eye on things. His work was far from over. Back at headquarters in Atlanta, Andre gathered his executive team again. The conversation shifted to the ongoing rollout of the diversity and inclusion programs. But Andre had another pressing issue to address. "I've noticed something in some of our stores," he said, his voice serious. "It's not just about direct discrimination. There's a culture of fear in some places, employees afraid to make mistakes. And that fear is impacting how they interact with customers." Frank, the head of operations, furrowed his brow. "Are you saying this is tied to the managers?" "Partly," Andre replied. Managers like Evelyn in San Francisco are so focused on keeping the numbers up that they've forgotten the human side of this business. We're not just selling luxury products. We're selling an experience. And that experience should make people feel good, not stressed. Maya, his assistant, spoke up. Maybe we need to include leadership training as part of the diversity program. Something that focuses on emotional intelligence and how to lead with empathy. Andre's eyes lit up. Exactly, he said. It's not just about hitting sales targets. It's about creating an environment where people can thrive, where customers feel welcome, and employees aren't constantly afraid of slipping up. The team agreed, and they set to work integrating leadership training into their diversity initiatives. Andre knew it would be a long road, but it was necessary. Real change wasn't just about removing overt prejudice. It was about building something sustainable, something lasting. A company where everyone, from staff to customers, felt valued. Months later, Andre visited the San Francisco store again, eager to see the impact of the leadership training. As he stepped through the doors, the difference was immediately apparent. The once tense atmosphere had softened. The young associate who had been so nervous during his last visit greeted him with a relaxed smile, her posture more at ease. The staff, no longer walking on eggshells, moved with confidence, engaging customers naturally and warmly. When Andre approached Evelyn, she greeted him with a smile that was not just polite, but genuine. Her posture had softened, and there was a humility in her tone that had been missing before. "Mr. Williams," she said, her voice warmer, "welcome back." Andre returned the smile. "Things seem to be going much smoother here lately." Evelyn nodded, a thoughtful look crossing her face. "Honestly, it's been a learning experience. I didn't realize how much I was focusing on the wrong things. I thought if the numbers were good, everything was fine. But I've started to understand that it's not just about the bottom line." Andre's heart lifted. "It's about people," he said simply. Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. I've been working on building trust with my team, and I think it's starting to show." Andre could see the change in her. The rigid manager who once ruled with an iron fist was now someone learning to lead with empathy. It was a powerful reminder that change was possible, even for those who seemed the most set in their ways. By the end of the year, Vera Lux had undergone a transformation that reached far beyond profits and sales. The diversity and inclusion program had become a core part of the company's identity. It wasn't just something implemented in response to complaints. It was a genuine effort to create a better environment for everyone involved. As Andre walked through the flagship store in Atlanta, watching the staff interact with customers from all backgrounds, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what he had envisioned, a company where luxury wasn't just for the wealthy elite, but for anyone who walked through the doors. He had faced his own battles with prejudice throughout his life, and now he had built something that stood against it. Vera Lux had become more than just a retail chain. It was a symbol of progress, a reminder that everyone deserved respect, no matter where they came from or what they looked like. As Andre left the store, the sun setting over the city, he knew there was still much work to be done. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he had made a difference, not just in his company, but in the lives of those who worked for him and the customers they served.